Bed appearance forensics. Undisturbed sleep state contradiction. A technical analysis of removal mechanics, consciousness states, and behavioral implications in acquisition scenarios. Part 1. The forensic observation. What was and wasn't disturbed when JonBenet's bedroom was first photographed and documented on the morning of December 26, 1996. Investigators encountered a peculiar visual scenario. The bed appeared relatively undisturbed. Bedding was present, but not dramatically displaced. There was no evidence of a struggle in the bedroom. The linens, though somewhat rumpled as from a child having slept in them, did not show the pattern of disruption one might expect from a child being suddenly removed from sleep. This absence of disturbance is forensically significant because it creates a specific investigative puzzle. How was a 6-year-old child removed from her bed without struggle evidence? The potential answers to this question illuminate different perpetrator categories and different scenarios involving removal, consciousness states, and the perpetrator's relationship to or knowledge of the child. Part 2. The mechanics of child removal. Consciousness. Variables. Forensic analysis recognizes that child removal from sleep can occur through several mechanically distinct scenarios. Scenario A. Familiar removal. Parent-caregiver. A child known to the remover is carried from bed while asleep or barely conscious. No struggle because the child recognizes the person handling them. Minimal disturbance expected. Scenario B. Unfamiliar removal without incapacitation. A child is removed by someone unknown to them without any sedative or incapacitating mechanism. Struggle would be expected. Significant bed disturbance would occur. Scenario C. Unfamiliar removal with incapacitation. A child is rendered unconscious or incapacitated by chemical, electrical, or other means, then removed by someone unknown to them. Minimal struggle during removal, because the child is incapacitated. Less bed disturbance expected. Scenario D. Combination. Familiar person, incapacitation for other purposes. A known person removes a child using incapacitation, not necessarily for the removal itself, but for control purposes. Variable disturbance depending on timing and method. The absence of bed disturbance in the Ramsey case narrows, but does not eliminate possibilities. It indicates either 1. The child was removed by someone familiar to her without consciousness of the removal, or 2. The child was incapacitated before removal, or 3. Some combination of these factors. Part 3. The consciousness state question. Critical to understanding the removal mechanics is determining JonBenet's consciousness state during removal. According to testimony, JonBenet came home from the Whites' Christmas party, asleep in the car. John carried her directly from the vehicle to her bed. Patsy changed her into night clothing. The child remained asleep throughout this process. She did not wake. She was described as a fairly good sleeper who very rarely would wake up at night. This documented sleep state is important because it establishes that JonBenet was capable of remaining asleep during parental handling and bedroom transfer. The family had experience with this. This was a routine nighttime procedure in the Ramsey household. The question then becomes, what would be required for an unfamiliar intruder to remove this child from bed without awakening her or causing struggle? Theoretically, without incapacitation, minimal probability. An unfamiliar adult approaching an unknown child's bed would likely awaken the child through approach, sound, or touch. A child would instinctively fear an unknown adult and would resist removal. With incapacitation, higher probability. A child rendered unconscious or significantly incapacitated would not awaken and would not resist removal. The evidence pointing to stun gun use becomes forensically significant in this context. A stun gun would incapacitate the child, rendering her unconscious and unable to struggle or cry out. Part 4. The stun gun, evidence and removal. Logic forensic pathology evidence indicates marks consistent with stun gun application to JonBenet's body. Specifically, patterned injuries to the right side of the face and lower left back are consistent with stun gun probes. From a removal mechanics perspective, a stun gun serves a specific function. It renders a person temporarily incapacitated without requiring chemical injection, loud noise, or other methods that might alert others in the house. If an intruder used a stun gun on JonBenet: 1. The child would be rendered unconscious. 2. The incapacitation would happen quickly and with minimal noise. 3. The child could be removed from the bed without struggle. 4. The child would not cry out or resist removal. 5. Parents in other parts of the house might not hear anything. Stun guns are relatively quiet. This scenario creates a mechanically coherent explanation for the bed disturbance absence. The child was incapacitated before removal became physically necessary. However, this scenario also creates a behavioral and psychological puzzle. Why would an intruder break into a home, navigate to a child's bedroom, incapacitate a sleeping child, then remove her for purposes that would ultimately involve confinement, assault, and death? The use of a stun gun suggests both premeditation — the perpetrator brought or obtained the device — and specificity of purpose. The device was used to facilitate removal of this particular child. Part 5. The silent removal problem. Noise and behavior. One of the central questions raised by the bed appearance and removal mechanics is, how was the child removed silently? If we accept that, the child was asleep when removed. No bedroom disturbance occurred. Parents remained asleep and unaware. The child did not cry out. Then the removal occurred in remarkable silence and without apparent struggle. From a behavioral perspective, a child being removed by a stranger, even an incapacitated child, would typically show some signs of movement, repositioning, or struggle. Yet the bed shows minimal disturbance. This silence raises investigative questions about the perpetrator's identity. Intruder scenario implications. An intruder would need to move efficiently and silently, despite unfamiliarity with the child and the room layout. The intruder would need to locate the child, navigate the bedroom, apply incapacitation method, and remove the child with minimal disturbance or noise. Family member scenario implications. A family member would know the room layout, know how the child sleeps, understand the household acoustic environment, and be able to move the child with practiced efficiency. Silence and minimal disturbance would be more explicable. The silent removal becomes forensically significant as an indicator of either 1. Careful planning and execution by an intruder, or 2. The perpetrator's familiarity with the child and bedroom environment. Part 6. The undisturbed bed and behavioral psychology. From a behavioral psychology perspective, the undisturbed bed appearance reveals information about the removal process itself. When a child is suddenly seized or awakened and removed by an unfamiliar person, the typical behavioral response is struggle and resistance. Defensive positioning. Child attempts to hold onto bed, door frames, etc. Vocalization. Crying, calling for parents. Disoriented and panicked movement. These behaviors would leave evidence: bed coverings displaced from child's grip, pillows moved from thrashing, visible signs of struggle. The absence of these signs suggests either the child was not conscious during removal. Unconscious children cannot struggle or vocalize. They become limp and passive during removal. Bed disturbance would be minimal because there is no resistance. The child knew the perpetrator and did not perceive threat. A child removed by a known and trusted caregiver would not struggle or cry out. If the removal happened while the child was barely conscious or transitioning from sleep, the child might not fully wake. This scenario could produce minimal bed disturbance. The child was not in the bed when removal occurred. If the child was removed from the bed earlier through some mechanism and was already in another location, basement, another room, when the actual removal from the home occurred, the bed would remain undisturbed. Part 7. Forensic reconstruction of removal mechanics. A forensic reconstruction of the removal scenario requires integrating multiple pieces of evidence. Evidence of sleep state. Child came home asleep. Was placed in bed asleep. Was a sound sleeper who rarely woke at night. Evidence of bedroom disturbance. Minimal disruption of bedding. No obvious struggle signs. No evidence of child resistance or gripping bedding. Evidence of incapacitation. Stun gun, marks on body. Pattern consistent with electrical incapacitation. Indicates child was rendered unconscious. Evidence of extraction point. Child's body was found in the basement wine cellar, separated from bedroom by multiple floors and spatial distance. Evidence of movement through house. Window well. Evidence consistent with basement entry. Leaf and debris consistent with movement through house. Reconstruction logic. If the child was incapacitated in the bedroom, she would become unconscious and unable to resist. The perpetrator could remove her from the bed, carry her through the house, and transport her to the basement without the child's conscious participation. The quiet and orderly nature of the removal would be consistent with a child who was incapacitated and unable to cry out or struggle. Part 8. The knowledge requirement. What does the bed tell us? The undisturbed bed appearance carries implications for the perpetrator's knowledge of the child and household environment. Knowledge required by intruder scenario. Know where the child's bedroom is located. Know the child sleeps on this specific bed. Know the child is a sound sleeper, unlikely to wake. Know how to incapacitate the child without alerting household. Know the escape route from the bedroom. Know the household layout well enough to navigate in darkness. Knowledge implied by family member scenario. Know the child intimately, including sleep patterns. Know the bed intimately, including normal sleep appearance. Know how to incapacitate the child with minimal disruption. Know the household layout and acoustic environment. Know when and how the parents are likely to wake, the bed's appearance as slept in, but undisturbed suggests a perpetrator who had either 1. Extensive prior knowledge of this specific child's sleep patterns and bedroom, or 2. Sophisticated planning that included reconnaissance of the household sleep environment and the child's typical sleep state. Both possibilities raise investigative questions about the perpetrator's identity and preparation. Part 9. The intruder risk analysis. Bedroom incursion hazards. From a criminal risk assessment perspective, a bedroom intrusion where a child sleeps is inherently high risk. Auditory risk. Any sound made by the intruder might awaken family members in nearby bedrooms or other parts of the house. Detection risk. Movement in a child's bedroom might be observed by a parent checking on the child or passing through the hallway. Child resistance risk. An unknown adult entering a child's bedroom and attempting to remove the child would likely trigger defensive and vocal responses from the child. Escape risk. An intruder in a child's bedroom must exit the room, navigate the house, and escape while carrying a resistant child or while a child is calling for parents. The fact that the removal apparently occurred without awakening other family members or triggering child resistance suggests mitigation of these risks through incapacitation. Using a stun gun to render the child unconscious eliminates child resistance risk and vocalization risk. It also facilitates escape because the child is limp and silent. Timing knowledge. Knowing when parents are deeply asleep reduces detection risk. However, an intruder would not have direct knowledge of when parents would be in deep sleep, unless the intruder had observed the household over multiple nights. Speed. An intruder might reduce time in the bedroom to minimize detection risk. However, the incapacitation and removal of an unconscious child would require some time and deliberate movement. The apparent success of the incapacitation and removal without household awakening suggests either Zauer's 1, an intruder with sophisticated planning and surveillance knowledge, or 2, a household member familiar with the sleep environment and capable of moving through it with practiced efficiency. Part 10. Comparing consciousness states. Parental versus intruder removal. A comparative analysis of how parental removal versus intruder removal would appear in terms of bed disturbance. Parental removal scenario. Parent carries sleeping child from bed routinely. Child remains asleep or semi-conscious during transfer. Bed shows evidence of child having slept there, but minimal disturbance from removal. No signs of struggle or panic. Process is routine and familiar to both parent and child. Movement through house is unhurried and confident. Result: undisturbed bed with normal sleeping appearance. Intruder removal scenario without incapacitation. Intruder must awaken child, or attempt to remove child while sleeping. Child awakens to unknown adult and panics. Child resists removal by gripping bed, thrashing, vocalization. Bed shows evidence of struggle. Blankets displaced. Child's position indicates resistance. Parent likely awakens due to child's cries. Result: disturbed bed with signs of struggle. Parent awakening. Vocal child intruder removal scenario with incapacitation. Intruder incapacitates sleeping child with stun gun. Child becomes unconscious immediately. Child cannot resist or vocalize. Removal involves carrying unconscious child from bed. Bed shows minimal disturbance because child is incapacitated rather than struggling. Prior parents may or may not awaken, depending on noise of incapacitation. Result: undisturbed bed appearance with unconscious child. The undisturbed bed in the Ramsey case is consistent with either parental removal of a familiar sleeping child or intruder removal of an incapacitated, unconscious child. It is inconsistent with intruder removal of a conscious, resisting child. Part 11. Autopsy. Evidence and consciousness timing. The autopsy evidence of stun gun marks provides critical timing information. If a stun gun was used, the question becomes, when was it used? During removal from the bed? During movement through the house? Before removal? The timing of incapacitation affects the forensic interpretation. Incapacitation before removal. The child would be rendered unconscious in the bedroom, then removed while incapacitated. This would produce minimal bed disturbance because the child is already unconscious before being moved. Incapacitation during removal. The child might wake as removal begins, then be incapacitated by the perpetrator. This could produce some bed disturbance from initial partial wakening before incapacitation takes effect. Incapacitation after removal. The child is removed from bed while still sleeping, then incapacitated during transport or in another location. This would produce minimal bed disturbance from the removal itself, but the incapacitation would occur away from the bedroom. The apparent absence of bed disturbance suggests that incapacitation likely occurred before or simultaneously with removal, not afterward. If the child had been removed from bed while conscious and resisting, we would expect to see evidence of that struggle. Part 12. The familial knowledge hypothesis. Extraction expertise. If a family member removed JonBenet from her bed, the mechanics of the removal would be facilitated by intimate knowledge. Intimate knowledge factors. knowing exactly where the child sleeps and how she lies. Understanding the child's sleep depth and likelihood of waking, knowing the child's reaction to familiar versus unfamiliar touch. Understanding the household acoustic environment, where sounds carry, where they don't. Knowing the parent's sleep depth and waking patterns, knowing the quickest routes through the house. Understanding what the child might expect or anticipate from this person. A family member could remove a child more efficiently and more quietly than a stranger precisely because of this intimate knowledge. The undisturbed bed becomes evidence not of a spectacular intruder feat, but of efficient removal by someone with household familiarity. Part 13. The incompatibility problem. Intruder, risk and reward. A sophisticated forensic analysis must examine whether the apparent quiet extraction is compatible with intruder motivation and risk calculus. Risk factors for intruder bedroom extraction. Very high risk of family member awakening. Very high risk of child vocalization without incapacitation. Requires detailed knowledge of household. Requires successful navigation through dark house. Requires carrying or managing a resistant child. Requires escape from occupied house reward factors for intruder. If kidnapping for ransom, child as leverage. If personal motivation, revenge, obsession. Victim accessibility. If assault motivation, victim vulnerability and isolation. Incompatibility analysis. The risk of bedroom extraction is extremely high for an intruder. The reward for kidnapping is theoretically achievable, but requires sustained engagement. Getting child from house, managing during escape, ultimately returning for ransom negotiation. An intruder would face extraordinary risk and difficulty. However, for a family member, the mechanics are fundamentally different. Low risk of awakening other family members if extraction happens when they are asleep. Child's reaction to family member is different. Less panic, possible confusion. Household familiarity eliminates navigation risk, knowledge of the household layout and exit points. Extraction can happen methodically, without rushing. The apparent quiet and orderly nature of the extraction becomes more consistent with family member involvement than with intruder involvement, when risk-reward calculations are considered. Part 14. Behavioral evidence from extraction success. The fact that the extraction was apparently successful without household awakening or apparent struggle provides behavioral evidence about the perpetrator. Evidence from extraction success. 1. The perpetrator had detailed knowledge of the household environment. 2. The perpetrator had detailed knowledge of the child's sleep state and patterns. 3. The perpetrator was comfortable moving through the house at night. 4. The perpetrator was capable of moving efficiently despite carrying a child. 5. The perpetrator was either familiar to the child or used incapacitation to prevent resistance. An unfamiliar intruder would face extreme difficulty accomplishing all of these factors. A family member would accomplish them naturally. The forensic principle is that crime scene evidence includes not only what was found, but what was not found. The absence of struggle, evidence is itself evidence. Part 15. Temporal and consciousness reconstruction. A comprehensive forensic analysis must reconstruct the likely temporal sequence. Timeline reconstruction. Intruder incapacitation scenario. Child asleep in bed. Documented. Intruder enters bedroom. No evidence of child waking. Intruder applies stun gun to child. Explanation for patterned marks. Child is incapacitated and loses consciousness. Child is removed from bed while unconscious. Explanation for undisturbed bed. Child is carried through house to basement. Child remains incapacitated during transport. Subsequent assault occurs in basement timeline reconstruction. Family member scenario. Child asleep in bed, documented. Family member enters bedroom. Child does not wake because familiar person. Family member removes child from bed with practiced efficiency. Knowledge of child's sleep and household layout. Child may or may not wake during transfer. If waking, child recognizes family member and does not panic. Family member carries child through house to basement. Child may be incapacitated after removal or for other purposes. Subsequent event occurs in basement. Both scenarios are mechanically possible, but they have different implications for the perpetrator's identity and the nature of the crime. Conclusion: what the bed doesn't say. The critical insight from bed appearance forensics is that the undisturbed bed appearance, combined with the evidence of incapacitation, creates a specific investigative profile. The bed tells us, 1. A child was in it. The bed shows signs of occupancy consistent with JonBenet having slept there. 2. Removal was orderly. The absence of struggle evidence suggests the child was either incapacitated before removal or was familiar with the person removing her and did not perceive threat. 3. The perpetrator had knowledge, whether knowledge of the household environment, intruder theory, or intimate knowledge of the child and home, family theory. The successful quiet extraction indicates sophisticated understanding. 4. Incapacitation was likely. The evidence of stun gun marks combined with undisturbed bed suggests the child was incapacitated at or before removal to prevent struggle and vocalization. 5. Risk was managed. The apparently quiet extraction without household awakening required either extensive pre-planning and surveillance, intruder, or household familiarity, family member. The undisturbed bed appearance is not, by itself, determinative of who removed the child. Rather, it narrows the possibilities and creates a forensic profile. The perpetrator was either 1. Someone intimately familiar with the child and household, or 2. An intruder with sophisticated planning knowledge and the ability to incapacitate the child before removal. What the bed forensics exclude is the scenario of an unknown intruder brutally removing a conscious, resistant child without incapacitation. Such removal would leave bed disturbance evidence and would likely awaken household members. The undisturbed appearance indicates a far more controlled scenario, suggesting either a person acting with household familiarity or an intruder with planning, equipment, and the ability to execute incapacitation with precision.
So I think my take on thus far is we talked about before. Detective Patterson he says he comes into the room, walks into JonBenet's room, and he says, "Look, bed appears to have been slept in, but it seems undisturbed. I don't see any signs of struggle. No evidence that a child was removed from the space, even in a manner that was against what the child wanted." And so, as we talked about before, if a person had used a stun gun or a stunner, then you would see things move. We talked about the blankets being moved because, it's an it's an electrical current. You know what I mean? That's going to do something to somebody. And even if there's no crazy movement that somebody does to where they're like, boom, you know what I mean? Something like that. Even if there's no movement like that, it's just going to be like a nudge, something like that. It's not going to be crazy. It's not going to be heavy. But the current going through especially a 6-year-old child, I think so many times, and I'm trying to stay on my notes, but so many times, we think through this case and we just kind of go straight through it with what has been given, without questioning some of the things that have been said. And I know you're questioning it. Obviously, that's why you're here. But just thinking about this idea that this stunner was used on somebody that was 6. That's a child. You know what I mean? Like, who did not see it coming, right? Supposedly, as a child who was asleep and probably didn't even see it coming unless they woke up and was like, hey, what the heck are you doing here? You see what I'm saying? So there would have been an immediate, even adults who see it coming, right? You see those videos on YouTube that, you know, a cop is about to use it on an adult, and they see it coming, and the cop is alerting, hey, I'm about to use it, put your hands behind your back. Hey, I'm about to use it, put your hands behind your back. And the person doesn't want to do it. Well, now we have somebody who may have been like unconscious in a sense, or sleep, and you're not announcing that you're going to do it. So obviously the first thing that you do is you jolt, right? The pillow is going to be shifted and all such as that. And I this is why the Boulder police, and people wonder, why did they do that? Why did the police do this? Why did the police do that? They did it because of how it looks to everyone. And I mean everyone, right? Without any prejudice or without any bias, just looking at it, right? You have FBI Ron Walker, who is like, that's what it sounds like to me. You have a person on the phone in the first 30 seconds, right? I think I counted. It's like the first 30 seconds, Kim Archuleta was already on her heels about, I don't know if I'm, Kim Archuleta was only on the phone with Patsy like a minute and 11 seconds and didn't believe her. At 5:30 in the morning, 5:45, almost 6 o'clock in the morning, something like that, and didn't believe her. People at the police station looking at the letter, the note was taken to the police station. They're looking at it and they're like, can you go get some samples from them? We'd like to see. Because we don't believe you. And everybody else coming into a space like, this bed looks undisturbed. The door over here looks undisturbed. The house looks undisturbed. Doesn't look like anybody broke in. So I'm not really sure what we would be looking for here. So people are like, oh, but did you check every door? No, but they cleared the house within a reasonable scope, right? Because the door had no outlet. They told you that. The door in the basement had no outlet. And I took the same thing. When you look at the bed, you just look at the bed on JonBenet's, like on some of the pictures of JonBenet, you just look at the bed. Doesn't look like anything. Looks like somebody came and took some sheets off the bed. That's it. So why then is the Boulder Police Department receiving flack? Man, I was watching. I can't even remember what the name of it is. I have to go look at it. I found it. So I was watching it's like a Lifetime documentary. I think it's on Prime Video. I think it came out on Lifetime first back in 2016. I was just watching it the other day, taking some notes on it. And the name of it is like JonBenet's Mother, Victim, or Killer, or something like that. And somebody from Court TV was saying, oh, why didn't the BPD do this or that and the third and blah, blah. They got a call and they just rushed the house, and, there was a kidnapping case already. And, they rushed the house and they just pulled up in marked police cars. I would have gone in unmarked cars or something like that. Even I know. And she said, even I know that from the Rockford Files. And I was like, the Rockford Files, right? What's that? I didn't even know what that was. So I had to go, but it sounded, I thought maybe it was real, like a real case that maybe I'd never heard of. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But this is a dramatized television series in the 1970s. And I was like, well, maybe it's based off of a true event. It's not based off of a true event. And we have a former television anchor talking about comparing a real world case, talking about, oh, I wouldn't even done that from the Rockford Files. It's a fake television show. What are you talking about? What you wouldn't have done from a television show? Do you know sometimes people, the outcomes that happen in television shows aren't always the best. And sometimes they're better than they would have been because it's a television show. What are you talking about? Why would you base a police investigation off of what you've seen on a television show? She sat there and said that with her whole chest. You've got to be kidding me. No disrespect to the young lady, but I was like, yo, what are you talking? And I'm not even going to get into him. There's this guy, and you've probably seen him. He's shown up on several documentaries talking about the JonBenet case, criticizing the police. I can't even remember his name, but he has glasses. He's a profiler. He's like a former profiler from El Paso is where he's from. He's from, like, I think it's El Paso, Texas or something like that. He has glasses on all the time, stuff like that. But he often talks about, oh, you know, the BPD, they didn't this and that and so on and so forth, because clearly they had 95% evidence towards internal investigation and 5% toward external, because all of the evidence, what person in their right mind would go against the evidence? Why would they do that? And it doesn't even, I don't give a crap if you have John and his team over here saying, oh, you know, we were getting tips and we were throwing tips at the police and this and that. Of course you were. But did those tips lead to anything? The police were calling them and checking them out. But we don't want to talk about that. The police were calling these tips and checking them out. Nothing. Because it would have never led to anything in the first place. Because it's a dead end. That's why I'm not going over there. If you keep sending me dead end leads, I'm going to stop calling them. Because you're not giving me good leads. But of course, the police, that's what I would do. But I think the police kept following up with all those things. It was like, oh, man, because you know how cops are. Oh, man, you never know. We got to turn over every rock. And they would call and go through all of the leads. And now we have John Ramsey, who's like, oh, man, you know, please don't tell me anything. They don't let me in on anything because you're not giving me good information. There's a whole lot more information, even at the very beginning of this thing, when they're asking Burke stuff, you know, about, does Burke know anything? If he would have known something, he would have told, I got that. But can we just have a conversation to just keep going? Oh, they showed up at his dorm room and they caught him off guard. In what way? In what way? Why does it matter? If the police show up at your house, would you be mad? If the police showed up and was like, hey, we'd like to talk about, we'd like to ask you some more questions about your daughter, JonBenet. Well, you kind of caught me at a bad time. I didn't know this, that, and the third. You would be absolutely ecstatic to learn that the police are coming to ask you more questions. Oh, man, that's the easiest way to get an update. Hey, what's the latest update? Oh, man, well, we're looking into this. We're looking into that. A couple more things of clarification that we'd like your opinion on this, that, and third. My main point is, I'm sorry, that child laying there would have jolted in some way as to move a pillow and to move the covers around to where they would not look natural. You would have seen that. And this person would have had to pull her up. There would have been a noise, at least a small noise, weird noise, a really weird noise. However quick, it would have been a really weird noise, like we talked about before. And that wasn't there. The bed looks normal. Looks like somebody slept there and then just wasn't there anymore. So if the stun gun wasn't used when she was in the bed, then at some point in time, we're expected to believe that she was pulled out of the bed and then it was used and whatever. But anyways, when I think about where the logistics become impossible through all that, and maybe I've already talked about this because I may have gotten ahead of myself. Cool. For an Intruder, if JonBenet is asleep, okay, let me just say this before I get into my thought, because I'm already going. If JonBenet was asleep and an unknown person enters her room and attempts to remove her without a stun gun, okay? Doesn't use a stun gun. I got to get her up out the bed first. She wakes up and she's in her own bed and she's in a familiar space and she has sort of these threat detection mechanisms, right? To where the touch that she's receiving is sort of unfamiliar, right? It's an unfamiliar touch. It's an unfamiliar smell, unfamiliar presence. And I think that these things wake children. These things wake normal people. So JonBenet wakes up at some point in time, recognizes an unknown adult, and what happens? John said, if there's somebody that she didn't know, she would be kicking and screaming and fighting to the death. She was kicking and screaming and fighting to the death on people she knew. Why would she all of a sudden, and that's what I'm saying, all of a sudden JonBenet picked now to not kick and scream? We know that with her grandma, she was kicking and screaming about being picked up and awakened to go to the restroom. But with a person that she doesn't know, doesn't recognize, she's groggy, she comes to and she looks at this person, she's like, who the heck are you? And she's like, oh yeah, absolutely fine. Somebody might say, oh, well, she's a child, maybe she froze. Maybe so, but that we don't have that track record. We have a pattern of a parent saying she would have fought. And we also have an example of the grandmother saying she did fight me, because that's not what she wanted to do. She wanted to go back to sleep. And so we know that JonBenet was the type of person who did not like being woken up. That's the kind of person that JonBenet was turning into. Person who didn't like to be pulled out of her sleep. That's just her. And a lot of kids do that. A lot of kids are like that. Don't like you waking them up out of their sleep. They get fussy. They get mad. They start fighting. They get a little physical. You know what I mean? You got to move their hands, this, that, and whatever. They get a little fussy. JonBenet is like that. But they also make, when you wake them up and they're groggy like that, they're going to make a sound. So I guess what you're telling me is that either maybe they woke her up and used the tape then, immediately, to kind of, you know what I mean? To keep her quiet, and then the stun gun? I'm not sure. Picked her up and she kind of came to and was like, what is going on? And then they, kind of used the tape. I'm kind of confused at that point. Now, of course, I think it's possible that if she woke up and it was an intruder. Anyways, if it was an intruder, she woke up and it was somebody that she trusted enough that her body remained asleep, is a familiar touch, or sort of semi-consciously, it's somebody that she knew. So we kind of have this profile to where she's either unconscious or something happened away from the bed and somebody tried to remove her, but she knew them, right? Had to know them to even have a chance not to say anything. But like I said, a fussy child is going to make some noise. They're going to grunt. They're going to, they're going to whine. They're going to do something. And the thing about it is, it's kind of unpredictable how loud they will get. I'm pretty sure there are people who have children who have, woken their kids up in the morning, get ready for school or something like that, and they're trying not to disturb and there's a kid in the other bed. They're trying not to disturb the other kid, so they get them up And the kid immediately, oh, I don't want to, and then shh, you have to, kind of tell them to be quiet. But just that fast, just that fast, the kid is already making noise. If you're Patsy and in the middle of the night, you're asleep, in the middle of the night, you hear, so I wanted to know for sure. I wanted to know for sure. What if there was something going on with Burke and JonBenet's, if something would like if John or Patsy heard it, if they heard anything, if they intervened or did anything, when JonBenet or Burke maybe had a dream, because I remember them talking about it, I just don't remember the specifics. They had a dream, or if they were sleepwalking or something like that. And so here's what some of the transcripts kind of say. I think in 1997. Yeah. This is Patsy. Yeah. So in the 1997 April interview with the Boulder Police Department, detectives specifically asked Patsy Ramsey if JonBenet ever had problems with sleepwalking. Patsy Ramsey responded with a definitive no. And when pressed further about whether anyone in the family, including Burke or John, had issues with sleepwalking or wandering at night, she again responded in the negative. Now, in 1998, the 1998 June interview with Lou Smith and Mike Cain, John Ramsey was asked similar questions regarding the family's sleep history. When Mike Cain asked if John ever had an incident of sleepwalking, John Ramsey replied no, and confirmed that to his knowledge, neither did Patsy. So they're not getting up and doing anything, the parents. In terms of dreams and sleep talking, there is a distinction made in the transcripts between the two children regarding vocalization during sleep. In the 1998 June interview with Lou Smith and Mike Cain, detectives asked John Ramsey if either JonBenet or Burke would ever cry out, quote, ever cry out in their sleep if they had bad dreams, close quote. John Ramsey offered a specific detail about his son, stating, quote, I remember Burke used to talk in his sleep, close quote. However, when investigators followed up to ask if Burke would cry out or if John could hear what Burke was saying when he talked in his sleep, John clarified, I don't remember, no, indicating that while he was aware of the habit, it did not typically wake him or require intervention. So we know that Burke makes noise. John is aware of the habit. Weirdly, John is like, no, I don't get up or do anything. I just know he does it. Okay, but you hear it. So hold, let me finish. Regarding JonBenet in the 1997 April interview with the Boulder Police Department, Patsy Ramsey was asked if her daughter ever came into the parents' room complaining of nightmares. Patsy Ramsey replied, I don't remember her doing that. So in terms of hearing nighttime activity, while the parents denied hearing the children wander for food or play, they did acknowledge being attuned to sounds of the household plumbing. In the 1997 April interview with the Boulder Police Department, Patsy Ramsey explained that while she didn't hear sleepwalking, she would hear Burke get up and use the bathroom because his bathroom was located near the end of the parents' room. In the 1998 BPD, let me just finish. In the 1998 BPD interview with Patsy Ramsey, she elaborated on this auditory detail when questioned about whether Burke ever went to the kitchen at night. Patsy Ramsey insisted that such a scenario was far-fetched and reiterated that her awareness of his nighttime activity was limited to the bathroom, stating, quote, I hear him get up and go to the bathroom. I can hear him urinating in the bathroom, close quote. Regarding JonBenet, in the 1997 April interview with the Boulder Police Department, Patsy noted that JonBenet was a, quote, fairly good sleeper, close quote, who rarely woke up, but if she did wet the bed, she might quietly move to the spare twin bed in her room or occasionally come to the parents' bed, though this was described as, quote, not very often, closed quote. So what I see here, and I thought this was Patsy's deal, but apparently it's John and Patsy's deal, to where they both can hear the kids moving about at nighttime. And it doesn't even have to be anything audible that they're saying. If Burke is sleep talking, John can hear it, but he doesn't interact. He just lets the kid go back. He just lets Burke go back to bed. Right? And so what they're saying, the argument, the counter argument to what my thing is if JonBenet would have said anything, and this would benefit the intruder, if JonBenet would have said anything or made a sound, then they probably would have sort of written it off as her sleep talking or what have you. I do doubt that the sound that JonBenet would have made would have been considered sleep talking. It would have been a weird sound. But I also have to think about the fact that, to add to that, if Burke is using the bathroom and she hears if you hear normal plumbing sounds, if you hear Burke urinating, then that's a sound that I'm familiar with. If Burke is sleep talking, you wake up enough to hear. And if you have kids, you watch over your kids like a hawk. And if I don't know who all does that, but if you have kids, you basically watch over your kids like a hawk. It's almost like a natural instinct. You're trying to let them sleep, but you keep on, going in and opening their door and stuff like that, and looking in just to see if they're okay. It's weird stuff as a parent, man. Like, it's kind of weird, because you're like, you're good, you're breathing, you're fine, everything's fine. But with the kids, you act like something is going to stop. I mean, it very may well stop, so you're always cautious with your kids. You're always on go with your kids. And so you're going in, seeing if they're still breathing. Look, if it were me, maybe John and Patsy are different. If I hear the slightest sound, I'm on alert. Maybe, and if it's a sound that I become accustomed to, like, the sleepwalking, sleep talking, I know what the sleep talking typically sounds like. Now, if I hear you having a full-on conversation, this is the thing. The brain is going to hold for a couple of seconds, right? I'm going to wake up, I'm going to hear it. And I'll be like, okay, sounds like something's going on. Okay? And I'm going to listen to the conversation, and then I'm going to go back to bed. Because I know you're just sleep talking, I'm going to let you walk it off. But if I hear you having a real coherent conversation, then I might get up and say, yo, just to check in, see what's going on, see if, whatever. I think that would have been the level to where JonBenet would be if she made a sound. It's a sound that Patsy wouldn't have been familiar with. She would have heard it and been like, that's weird. Just going to get up and go downstairs real quick and check in. In that case, you would have caught the intruder if there was an intruder. Because the intruder cannot run. The intruder has to move slow. And I'll shut it down with this. The intruder has to move slow so you can get back to the veil. The intruder has to move slow. And so therefore, Patsy would have caught him. Coming out of the room, going out a spiral staircase, or the person would have had to drop JonBenet on the bed and roll under the bed or something like that. That's my point. In previous analysis we've talked about how the intruder would have had nowhere to go. Where would they have gone? Especially two people. Where would they have gone? You see what I'm saying? You think about that. Because we've been sold this narrative of the intruder. If JonBenet wakes up and goes, oop, and you're like, oh dang, she's waking up, she's causing us more trouble than I expected, I gotta leave her. Because, say for example, okay, the point that everybody that people like to try to bring up, the young lady that was down the street and I think was also in JonBenet's, going to the same studio that JonBenet was, right? And how the dad left the house, because people love to bring this up, how the dad left the house, right? And okay, cool. How the dad left the house or was going on vacation or something like that, and it was just the mom. And that's what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm telling you. Listen to what I'm telling you. It's normal stuff. the mom heard talking. She heard it. And she was like, yo, this don't sound normal. Let me get up and go check on my daughter. She didn't think about danger. She didn't think about none of that. She just got up and was like, yo, let me go, check on my daughter. And she got up and went in. That's what I'm saying. Think about it. If that was the case, Patsy would have done the same thing. What's that sound? Patsy would have got up, gone downstairs, checked. And guess what? She caught the person in the act. The person is caught. But guess what? The person had an escape route. The person ran and jumped out the window and was gone. I think they ran and jumped out the window and they were gone. But I think that was like a one story or something like that. I think it was like one story. That was the escape plan. That was the backup plan. If a person is caught, and this is what I'm saying, we really got to think about this. Think about this. Let's break it down. If a person is caught in JonBenet's room by Patsy, where they gonna go? Patsy's standing in the door, and she's like, "Oh, John, come down, John." John is like, "Patsy." John gets up, runs down really quickly. He's there in a couple seconds. Where would the intruder go? Is he going to go out to the balcony and jump off a second story balcony? You see what I'm saying? You see why it's hard for me? You can go jump off the balcony, the second story balcony with no ladder. Oh, they had a ladder, you say? Sitting out against the balcony rail in broad daylight? Even if you did, they come out, they take the ladder, John comes out. John could throw that ladder, he could just drop it. And the person, you remember Home Alone, the person is holding on to the ladder, and guess what Kevin did? He pushed the ladder. Boom. Seriously injured, the cops show up, you're donezo. Easy money. You get caught just like that. All of those months of meticulous planning down the drain. You think that criminal who meticulously planned that crime is going to be caught dead to rights like that? Absolutely not. They didn't even come through with, and see, this is what I'm saying. It all this nonsense about, oh, the intruder could have came in here. The intruder could have came through here. The intruder could have came through here. Which way did he come in? Because I'm starting to think that all these ways that you're suggesting are nonsense. Oh, he came through the elevator. The elevator shaft? Oh, he may have came here. I looked at the curtains in JonBenet's room, and this one was tied up, but this one wasn't tied up. This is what John said, but this one wasn't tied up. Intruder may have come through here. The window was broken and they knew that. So they moved the grate and came down through the grate and then left through here. How many people came through your house? What are you talking about? That's it, man. Enjoy the video.